What is going on YouTube? Hit back making another brand new Crypto TV episode. In today's video, we're going to be looking at XRP Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin. We're going to spend most of the time discussing Bitcoin and the other altcoins like Litecoin and Ethereum. We're going to be spending a little bit of time on XRP because XRP is just kind of trending sideways with what appears to be a major descending triangle, and it's more or less just more consolidation that the coin has to have, maybe even a bearish move to the downside before we see any sort of, turn of events. Otherwise, I do want to spend quite a bit of time focusing on Bitcoin's channel as well as Ethereum and Litecoin, because Bitcoin is showing some very interesting things. Not only is it intertwined within its high-low middle moving average, which is interesting, but we also need to see a confirmation of a higher low than we've seen in the past. We've been setting these higher lows, but we haven't yet had a higher high in comparison to the previous highs that we've set on the market. We've pretty much been setting higher lows every single time, and we've now just started to set lower highs. So ultimately, we need to see which direction and which area Bitcoin decides to close for us to ultimately get the deciding factor as towards whether we're still in a bear market or whether or not we're going to be confirming a bullish market and heading back up to, some pretty nice levels come, 2020 halving in May. Otherwise, we will be looking at an interesting article posted by Cointelegraph in regards to Bitcoin can gain 100% in 2020 and the halving is not even priced in. Otherwise, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on post notifications, leave a giant thumbs up, and let's jump into today's episode. So guys, as you know, some interesting things is happening on the market right now. Obviously, you can see the past couple of days we've been showing a fairly bearish signal on Ethereum in regards to the fact that might be capped off and we may start to trend lower. Now, for those of you that maybe even hold Ethereum, this might be something to consider paying attention to. Otherwise, if you don't, you may want to think about buying into Ethereum, or I may even start to think about buying into Ethereum as we bottom off on the charts, and we'll see whether or not this will influence the rest of the market, Bitcoin and XRP, to ultimately drop lower. Now we do have, I'm here on DueDEX. For those of you that don't know what DueDEX is, I know most of you do and most of you have been taking advantage of this, but for those of you who don't know, this is basically a website that allows you to short, buy long, and sell short, as well as leverage trade. Now, back in the beginning of my YouTube channel, I used to show, I believe it was Coinbase Pro as my means of buying and selling cryptocurrency, but ever so recently, I've switched over to DueDEX, and my reason being not necessarily because I can cash out to US dollar, but I can actually make money on the market falling as well as the market moving up. And if I don't have that much to trade around with, I can use leverage trading to basically increase my margin. So if I'm trading with $500 and that's all I have, or even $200 and that's all I have, if I leverage it by 10 times, I can actually type in $2,000 and trade around with $2,000 instead of the 200, and I can make the profit off of 2,000 instead of 200 and keep that. Now, also consider there's a lot more risk involved in this, so it is something to consider. But if you do want to mess around with this, it is the first link in the description. Definitely check that out. But ultimately, what I like about the website is it actually has the TradingView charts hosted on here. Not sure which Bitcoin to USD it is that I'm looking at for right now, but what I do like is that I can add the indicators just like how we have on the normal TradingView. Towards here, you can see I just added recently the volume, but you can see ultimately the pattern that's on Bitcoin. That is something we kind of have to pay attention to. Now, I'm not sure why it doesn't go back all that far. I mean, if we went to the weekly, you can see it pretty much begins right in August of 2019. So those are some unanswered questions. But if you guys look on the Bitcoin chart that we're seeing right here, you'll see where my worry is and where my mindset is. You can see where the price is hanging out right now at around $8,000. Notice the massive resistance that we have at this exact level. This is a huge resistance right here. Now the price is slightly higher than that, ever so slightly, but for the most part we are intertwined. We can move this up ever so slightly, and you can see this is where we're hooked right now. The price is stuck right here, and this is ultimately the deciding factor. If we can start pushing up higher in price, then we should ultimately be able to consider a bullish market is starting, and we should be expecting some higher prices. I believe I can add in the relative strength index, which is also something I enjoy using. You can see, bam, it's right here. Let's extend this a little bit lower, pull this a little bit farther down, so we now have two charts right here, and you can see ultimately what's going to happen. The fact is that we are still fairly bearish. I'm going to have to change those colors eventually, but you can see we're kind of teeter-tottering on that overbought level on the daily, but ultimately this is a very strong resistance that we're kind of intertwined in. Now ultimately what will decide whether or not I buy in is looking at the trading view charts on the Coinbase charts. You can see some very interesting patterns forming. Now notice on here that we do have this slight uptrend which is coming into effect, as well as these downtrends that I have drawn here. Now you can see in the Bitcoin can gain 100% article, they're using some interesting thoughts. Obviously Fundstrat expects over 100% Bitcoin gains, and the report is currently available on Twitter as well as Tom Lee. Let's actually see if I can pull this up and we'll get his tweet right here. All right, so yeah, we published our 2020 crypto. You can see right here, bottom line, yada, yada, yada. Doesn't seem to be as important, but basically they're calling that they could be expecting to see bigger movements as we head up higher. Cointelegraph reported geopolitical factors form the basis for the other commentators' bullish Bitcoin price scenarios for this year. As regards the impact of the halving, however, pundits are less united. Last month, Jason William, co-founder of Digital Assets, said May would prove to be the non-event for Bitcoin. So that's kind of where my mindset is. I do believe we may actually consider heading up until May of the halving in 2020, and then kind of teeter-totter off. So kind of similarities in the prices here where we shot up as we head into June, but we'll do this as we head into May, and then come the halving, we'll start to trend down. People will buy the rumor, which will be this uptrend, sell the news as we head lower. So in regards to this price and where I expect us to go, ultimately we are setting higher lows, which is awesome, and lower highs. So that is where, higher lows, which you can see right here. Boom and boom. Now we're looking for a third one, and we're setting lower highs every single time. So we need that confirmation, because as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we need to break the previous one or this one right now. So ultimately what I'm anticipating is a consolidation or correction downwards, and then seeing movement upwards. That will ultimately be the bullish factor on the coin, and then I'll see the prices go higher. But you'll see where the problem relies in this market right now. We're kind of intertwined within the high-low MMA, and what we have to reference as to us breaking out of this is our previous movement that we had in October, which ultimately ended in us breaking bearish and consolidating down as we hung out longer and longer inside the high-low middle moving averages. Now this is now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of consolidation. We've had a lot more here. This is about 2 weeks, maybe even a week and a half before we broke bearish. We're looking for that same thing to happen here, that same pattern. Ultimately, I am anticipating a correction lower. I know the price is trading at $8,100, which is still beautiful, but ultimately I am anticipating consolidation downwards. You can see the top bearish trend right here does show that we're kind of, capped off, and that there is resistance at that high-low MMA. Very, very, very happy and surprised if we break bullish, but ultimately there's a lot of things writing that this coin will fall lower. Now, my original guesstimate was that we would fall down to 5,300. It's still on play, but less likely now that we did decide to break outside of the original downtrend. But what we do need to pay attention to and factor in is in regards to this uptrend that we've had since the beginning of January, or the end of January, beginning of February. This uptrend does hold to be quite a bit of support, and we ultimately should be heading back down to retest this and then start to trend back up. So this is the pattern that I'm looking for. The biggest bullish scenario is we head down here, and then we go like this. This will ultimately set a couple of things. Not only will we hit down here on support, this will set the new higher low, which you can see this will be the third confirmation. And then if we can break above the previous price of $8,200, we'll then be setting a new higher high, or a higher high. You can see what I'm referring to. These are the higher highs, which are currently setting higher lows each time. Lower highs each time. This is a lower high than the last one, and you can see, but if we break above here, we're going to set a higher high than the previous one. And I know these terms can get complicated, but you can kind of see what I'm referencing. And then we'll ultimately be starting that uptrend to some newer levels, which will be ultimately the benefactor of a bull market is starting, and we won't be so bearish. The other result is we don't do that and we break this, which is still a possibility. The second we break the level previous to here, we'll ultimately be still in this bear market, and that still is a possibility. You'll notice in the past we've had confirmations of trending in here before we broke back down bearish. You can see we've had it even here where we had prices this high and then we consolidated back down. It is still very possible that we could ultimately go like this, trend up here, break back down on here, and then break back down inside of here. This would ultimately continue the pattern that we're looking at. It's ultimately a very interesting thing, and I don't think it's definitely a necessary move to be putting in money right now, especially in my terms, because we don't really have that solid confirmation and solid ground as to which direction we're going. And to me, that's risk, and I don't really want to mess around in that. Then when you look at other cryptocurrencies for confirmation, you'll see exactly what I'm looking at right here, which is obviously Ethereum. And what I mentioned in the beginning of the video is Ethereum is bearish right now. You can see we're capping off right here. This is now a double top. You can see we've hung out here prior, but you can see we're still kind of consolidating here, which will ultimately look to break bearish. That's what it seems like it wants to do. It wants to consolidate and fall back down $100. This will ultimately probably influence Bitcoin to do the exact same thing, consolidate back down to 5,200. Litecoin, the only difference is I'm very shocked we broke bullish, retesting the high-low MMA. Honestly, a great run. Wasn't anticipating it, but when we look at Ethereum and Bitcoin, they do show some sort of consolidation pattern or retracement in the near future. XRP looks okay, just consolidating, not much to talk about. But Ethereum is my worry. We're capped off with Ethereum. Bitcoin is kind of capped off here. I'm honestly still slightly bearish, and I know that may be a bummer to some, but that's ultimately my thought. And honestly, with Ethereum trending downwards, if I see any sort of confirmation bearish, and you can see if we do decide to break the resistance right here, I may buy in short. Ultimately, if we see any sort of confirmation above this, if we can break below here, it's an immediate buy in order to short the coin down to here. Otherwise, guys, that's going to wrap up today's episode. Definitely make sure to sign up and get yourself ready on DueDEX. I know it's helped a ton of people, but otherwise, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on post notifications, leave a giant thumbs up, and I'll see you in tomorrow's episode. Peace.